Live here at the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by Alex Thompson, writer and director of M and Selma Go Griffin Hunting. It's very cool to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Neil. Means a lot.
Yeah. Now, I love this movie. Honestly, as soon as I heard the premise and I saw the picture of the griffin, I was like, this is something I'm going to really like. But it was a lot darker than I thought it was going to be. But for people not aware, could you give them an idea of what the short is about?
Sure, absolutely. So M and Selma Go Griffin Hunting takes place in an alternate 1930s kind of Dust Bowl era California. Think John Steinbeck's California, but with griffins in it. And it postulates that there's a longstanding cultural paradigm that mothers have to bring their daughters on a sacred rite of passage hunt to kill a mythical creature. And the daughter in question can't be accepted into society as a quote unquote proper woman or whatever until she's fulfilled this ritual. And our particular story follows M, daughter, played by Millie Shapiro of Hereditary fame, infamy, who's brought along by Selma, played by Pollyanna McIntosh from Walking Dead and a whole bunch of other things, who really wants her daughter to do this kind of the old guard way, which involves killing a creature with a knife, feeling the blood run down her hand, kind of a very arcane, very visceral way of doing it. And M begins to kind of poke holes at the lore and the dogma and question why this is done. And that doesn't bode well with Selma. And so some intergenerational conflicts and tension emerge over the course of the film and threatens to turn deadly. So it's kind of a, it examines things like the friction between generations, the way we perpetuate cycles of violence across generations for no apparent reason other than it's just what you do. And it's all kind of wrapped up in the valence of a metaphorical mother-daughter, kind of grim style dark fable, I suppose.
Was there anything that that was like an inspiration for the story itself?
Yeah, I mean, when I first conceived of it, God, almost a decade ago now, basically, 2015, it was very much something that felt like a good encapsulation of kind of all the things that were important to me as a storyteller. There's kind of two sides of Alex Thompson. There's the sides that love the kind of the Bergman, Bela Tarr, Ivan's Childhood. Those were the kinds of movies that largely inspired this. The kind of, I guess you might say, the canonical European art house pretentious stuff, which I love. And I say pretentiously with all the love in the world, the kind of, high-minded filmmaking that was kind of my first love. But I also have always had this other side that grew up loving, reading back issues of Cinefex magazine and loving Stan Winston and Rick Baker and Ray Harryhausen and, the geniuses that, have given rise to some of the iconic creations of genre cinema. And so it's like, how do I square that peg? How can these two very different worlds that usually have no overlap on the Venn diagram, can you let those kind of live together? And this was kind of my attempt to say a bunch of things that were on my mind thematically, and B, it was a little bit of a petri dish experiment. Can those two things live alongside one another in a way that feels organic and of a whole? And yeah, it kind of became my white whale because it was a 10-page script. On paper, it should have been very simple. It's a mother, a daughter, a forest, and some creatures. How hard can that be to screw up? And then flash forward, nearly a decade, and it was quite a battle getting it all the way to the finish line, which in our case was Sundance 2025 this year, which was a very rewarding, kind of a out the gate win for a movie that took quite a while to get made.
Yeah. And for people who haven't seen it yet, I mean, it's very ambitious, short. There's a lot of effects in the movie, and they look great. And when you're putting it together, did anyone say like, or did you even think like, how am I gonna? But you say like, is this gonna be easy? We just two characters, but like, actually making griffins, flying griffins, and maybe some other characters. And you mentioned Ray Harryhausen. So was there ever like, originally, did you think like, how am I going to make these? Are they going to be puppets? Are they going to be stop motion? Or like, were there different times you had them at different things?
It was always kind of a question of the way I like to sometimes pitch the tone of the film to people is if Ingmar Bergman took a stroll through Jurassic Park as it was kind of reconceived by John Steinbeck, rewritten by John Steinbeck. Like, that's what I want this movie to feel like. That's what I want you to feel like the characters could have crawled out of like an Andrew Wyeth painting or like a Dorothy Lang photo of like Dust Bowl era immigrants, something like that. And I wanted the creatures to not feel like movie monsters, but something that was completely organic to the world that Em and Selma inhabit as characters. And so I was always kind of format agnostic as to how I brought these creatures to life, because they're all just tools at the end of the day, right? Had the budget been there, I would have loved to mix and match some practical elements with CG, but it ultimately came to be that CG made the most sense with what I could afford to do, because you're just paying for people's time at that point. You're not paying for the hard materials, the shop costs, the foam latex, the R&D. The other dirty little secret with practical effects is that it also ups your production time quite a bit, and that's fine. But on a short film where every dollar counts, it made the most sense to go with CG. And the beauty of doing that is that what we could really do is my team and we could really push the assets hard, because it's a short film, because there isn't a lot of money, but because it becomes kind of a hat in hand. Well, it's a short, we're doing this out of passion. Everyone knows that a short film, it's usually a dog whistle for, being a director's like obsessive baby or whatever. It meant that, I could say to people like, look, here's what I have, but here's what the ambition is. Are you willing to take this journey with me and really kind of push this thing as far as it can? And so without having the lingering deadlines that a lot of the people who worked on this would kind of would dictate when they have to call something done or like good enough to move forward. The schedule was kind of whatever I made it. And in this case, we shot it in February of 2021, and we finished post like, I don't know, 5 or 6 days before Sundance, like literally right in time to get the film ready for Park City. So, I mean, it really was like a very painstaking, painterly process of very obsessively looking at the creatures, taking the time. I have to give a shout out to Gabe Beauvais and Greg Stranges, who did the initial sculpts, and Gabe ended up staying on, becoming a much bigger part of the movie overall. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit, but it became a lot of very kind of taking a step back, looking at just like the silhouette, being like, okay, what can we improve? How does it read in a medium shot? How does it read from dead on? We wanted every angle to feel as inspired as possible. And at the same time, it needed to really feel like a real living, breathing animal. So it's like, okay, a griffin in terms of classical lore is supposed to be part eagle and part lion. That wouldn't literally be what that animal was. It would be like, if you squint, that's what it looks like, a composite of those two things. But if it had like a real evolutionary life history, and if it was a real creature from a real, a real phenotypic history and evolutionary history, like what would that look like? So it was a really fun process of kind of like, basically building out a completely within reason, biologically plausible, biologically functional animal for this movie, while at the same time hopefully having them feel majestic and kind of ugly and kind of scary and whatever else.
Yeah, in my head, it's kind of like in like the modern day Batman movies, where they take like characters and they're like, well, what would these characters be in real life?
Yes,
a real life version of the Riddler or the Joker and all these people.
Exactly. And that's not to say, it was never a process of taking away taking things away. It was always kind of an additive process, because nature truly offers no shortage of like just bizarre quirks and traits. And that's like especially true of like of birds and things like that, kind of avian and non-avian dinosaurs. That was a big point of inspiration. A lot of prehistoric animals. That extends even to the fairy creatures, the wood nymphs, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which were very much inspired by like things like arboreal salamanders and prehistoric amphibians and all sorts of, we were pulling inspiration from kind of whatever felt as fresh and inspiring and interesting as possible, while fulfilling the needs of the script.
Interesting you called them nymphs, because you think of nymphs as like something that has a lot of sex and stuff, which they do, but in not a pleasant way. Yeah.
Yes, there's a reason we call them wood nymphs and not fairies in the movie.
Which it was I loved it. I even told you initially when you sent me the email about the short. I grew up playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, so like I was like, oh, this has me interested, and it was really cool to see like a dark side of the, it's even referenced in the movie, like they thought they would be not magical, it's not the word, majestic, but yet they're like an animal.
Yeah, well, that's part of and that was, again, it all goes back to like theme and character, right? Like in this case, the rule was, everything in here needs to feel like it touches on M's disillusionment with what she expected her life to be like moving into adolescence, as opposed to the reality. So, in her field guide that she uses, which is called like a North American bestiary, it's filled with, kind of iconography and imagery that looks like classically like what you would think like a griffin would look like, whatever. And then you compare it with the reality, which we introduced right from the first frame, in which Selma mentions, they're inbred, they're malnourished, they don't live on the land that they're originally intended to. They're basically an invasive species at this point. That all goes back to character and theme and point of view. So that gave us a good thematic excuse to really make them kind of as unpleasant as possible. The Griffins, especially, we really leaned into, kind of like what would a composite of like a vulture and a hyena feel like. And because there were certain budgetary shortcomings, like I was told early on, I was advised by a friend who works in visual effects, don't do feathers. You won't be able to afford it. It'll break it'll completely destroy your budget. It'll be a technological nightmare, and you'll have to simulate every single shot. And so it's like, okay, noted. That's one battle I'm going to have to cede. There can't be like this big majestic plumage or something like that. So instead, we turned to things like flying foxes and bats and stuff like that when designing the wings. And so you try and turn a budgetary limitation into a creative choice, I suppose, whenever you can.
I think it also adds some nuance to all the characters, because if they are just like very magical, majestic beings, it's like right away it's like, oh, it's wrong to kill these, and it makes it more questionable. It's like, well, is there an actual reason to that they should be killed? And at the same time, they are animals that are just trying to survive, so it makes it a lot more questionable. And the mom character is like, is she bad, or is she doing what she thinks needs to be done for her daughter to survive in this world? So I like all that.
It's a tragedy, right? It's kind of a tragic coming of age tale, and I think, from Selma's point of view, she's trying to do right by her daughter, because all she knows is what she had to go through, and she had to go through the most visceral, awful, unpleasant version of this right. And yeah, she's perpetuated upon her daughter because she fears that she might not have as full a life as she could if she acquiesces to the way other modern girls do it, which is kind of you go out, you shoot something, you cut off a horn or an antler or whatever, you take it home, put it on the mantle, and you call it a day. And it's like, no, that's not good enough. We have to do this the proper dogmatic way. You can read a lot into like it's the death of religion, it's the death of a belief system, it's the death of a cultural custom, whatever. I've had a lot of different people come up to me with a lot of different readings of what that element means. And I'm glad that they have disparate and unusual readings on it, because that's what you hope as a storyteller. And that's the beauty of I think, like kind of fables and fairy tales especially, is that they kind of are permeable across culture, and they'll speak to a lot of people in a lot of different ways. That's why so many of them endure for so long. That's why we have so many different versions of Beauty and the Beast. That's why we have so many different flood myths, stuff like that. I spend way too much of my free time really studying those things and figuring out, as a storyteller, how can I tap into something that feels really primal and archetypal, because that gives you your best chance at longevity in your storytelling. And then you hope that your filmmaking maybe will be worth a damn too as well.
Yeah. But like you say, now people can read whatever they want into that, but the idea of questioning your cultural norms or things that came before you is something that would totally be universal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we're at an inflection point in time where that's an especially bespoke theme to explore, because I do think that that's something that, as technology shifts rapidly, I don't know about you, but I speak to someone who's even just 5 or 10 years my junior. And culturally, it feels like I'm from a different planet than them. There's so many things that there's so much common parlance that to them is just secondhand, that just leaves my head reeling. And vice versa, up the chain. And so it it's always worth looking at those things and examining them. And I think that genre cinema can be a good way to explore that stuff while also, fulfilling the requisite, sense of excitement and, hopefully a little bit of awe and wonder. The entering the mythic register is kind of the way I've discovered I like to phrase it, is like, can you tell a story that enters a mythic register? And I think only genre storytelling, I hate that term, fantastical storytelling. Genre sounds like a cheap marketing word. I think that fantastical storytelling is kind of the best way to do that.
I've always been confused by the word genre, because a genre could be literally any genre.
Yes.
So I don't even understand what you're saying. It always means, horror, sci-fi, but why doesn't it mean drama, comedy? Because they're all a genre. So it's always a confusing term, I think.
It is. I think it became just a shorthand. It's really it's most useful, I think, for like producer speak, for development people. Stuff like that. And I get it. I understand that, there's certain concessions that sometimes need to be made if you want your work to be pitchable, if you want your story to stand out somehow. I know that I'm slowly learning to play that game.
Yeah. You wouldn't have walked into Blockbuster back then and say, I want to see a genre movie. They're like, well,
oh, right.
They all tell you what genre you want.
It's very much an insider baseball term, but we all know what it means. And so it kind of becomes a convenient way, I guess, to, a shorthand.
Pepe Potit here. He's watching from the doctor's office. Well, I hope everything's all right, Pepe. It's a weird place to be watching the show, but hey, whatever. So, what was the thought process?
I hope whatever you're there for, I hope that this helps make it a little more endurable.
That's true. Yeah, they should show this in the doctor's office on this TV screen. So why black and white, or I don't know, maybe call it grayscale?
I'm glad you asked that. So the way I had always conceived this movie way back in the day was that it would look like that. I was very much inspired by like things like the Greg Toland's amazing cinematography on the John Ford adaptation of Grapes of Wrath. Things like, Tarkovsky's Ivan's Childhood, Bela Tarr movies, Michael Haneke, the White Ribbon, right? Stuff like that. And fantasy is usually an expensive enough genre that if this were, quote unquote, a real movie being done in a real world sense of how it's financed and put together, you just wouldn't be allowed to do it that way. They really would not, like, they'd crunch the numbers and they'd say, like, it's financial suicide to attempt to do a movie this expensive in black and white. It's not happening. So that was originally the conceit. Once we started designing the creatures, so sometimes around October, November 2020, as we were beginning to kind of actually put the movie together in earnest and storyboard it. Shout out to Eliza Roberts, my longtime go-to storyboard artist and production designer, who did incredible work boarding every single shot of the film with me that I then took and cut an animatic out of. But anyways, we started designing the creatures. And it's like, oh, they're so colorful, they're so interesting. Maybe it shouldn't be that way. Maybe that's just, maybe there's a reason why movies like this lean into a diverse and lush color palette. And then as we entered post again, I realized early on, it's like, well, show me the rule book. Says who? Why is it that the movie, the story always spoke to me in black and white. B, frankly, I think it helps sell the era, between the costumes and the kind of the patina to the dialogue and stuff like that. Like, I want you to feel like you're being transported to, Southern again, Steinbeck's California in the 1930s at the height of the Depression, between these two horrible world wars, this time of kind of a moral gray zone where for Selma, it's a very dogmatic thing. You have to do it this way. She has a very black and white view of the world. It just made sense. And I hope it would help the movie stand out and feel a little more unique and feel like something that, quote unquote, you can't get away with usually. And I stand by the decision. If one cares to look on our social media, we have images of the creatures in color, if you care to see what they look like. And at a frame by frame, shot by shot basis, they're cool. But I felt like it was worth making a sacrifice of those individual moments that really felt vibrant in color for the better of the whole, for the whole film. I just felt it transported me in the way that it couldn't in color. And so that was the decision making process. The movie told me it wanted to be in black and white, and eventually I just stopped fighting it. That's the simpler way I could have answered it, I suppose.
There's another story that, when you're from that era, and I don't want to mention it, but I do want to, because the end, I think, is up to interpretation, and it could, to me, it kind of was like another famous story from that era, which like I said, I don't want to say because it's like, I think people will know what I'm talking about and give away the ending.
Yes.
So, and I think the black and white helps in all of that.
You're referencing too. I think I know exactly which novel.
Yeah. And also, I want to mention, because I often talk on the show, I'm a big practical effects guy. That's what I grew up with. But the CG in this looks awesome, and I think that's hard to do. Like the CG, it looks like there's weight to the creatures, and I think when CG is done well, like Jurassic Park looks great, and I think it's and you're talking about really having a lot of interest in what they look like and making sure they look good. And I think when people take that extra effort, the CG, can work really well.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you say that, because that was really, like yourself, I when possible, it's always better to build something and put it in front of the camera, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's a non-negotiable, of course, like we take that for granted. However, CG as a tool has come a long way. And the reason why it frankly often doesn't look very good, even at a very high budget level, has less to do with the technology and more to do with the decision makers and them changing their mind and being mercurial and fickle about what they want until the 11th hour. You've heard countless, I don't need to be tacky and name names, not the least because a lot of the people who worked on this movie work on these big budget tentpole movies, who we know what culprits I'm referring to. You hear horror stories all the time in the trades and things like that about people just being overworked, exhausted, feeling like they're not being able to do their best work because there's a lot of creative changes being asked for really late in the game, long after things have been, approved, and it's kind of made its way all the way through the pipeline. If you know what you want going in, and especially if you're a filmmaker who is really willing to roll up your sleeves and learn the language a little bit, not view visual effects as like something that's like antagonistic to your process, but something that can be integral to it, something where these people can be like fully integrated collaborators and not people who are there to kind of like, you have to kind of guardrail them because their work will like somehow sully your filmmaking or whatever. It's amazing how far that small attitude shift can change the quality of the work being done. But also, it goes back to I can't sing their praise enough. I had an amazing team on this movie. Most of the animation was done by 5 people, and principally, basically, 85-90% of those shots ended up being done by 2 people. And so I'm gonna there's a lot of names I could shout out, but on the animation side, like I have to give all the praise in the world to Andy Fraser, who was our animation lead, Pierre-Lévy Allard, who did the kind of second most, probably 30 shots, something like that, and Nina Fisher, who did 10 of what we would call kind of the most pivotal shots in the movie, kind of hero shots, as they call them in visual effects. And it was an amazing process, because usually, these are guys and gals who they work on Marvel movies, Star Wars, Harry Potter, like you name it, like their CVs are basically all the big tentpoles of the past, 15 years or whatever. But they often feel like cogs in a giant operation by their own admittance. It feels like they're not being able to do their best work because it's if you're working on, I don't know, House of Dragon or Superman or whatever, like it is such a big, enormous machine and operation, right? In order to get those things delivered.
When you see those movies and you, because I'm someone who stays for the credits, and you'll see it'll be a block of 100 people who worked on the
that's a small one if it's only 100 people. There's a reason why the end credits of tentpoles are now like 15 minutes long, whereas in there was once a time where Star Wars: A New Hope having a 4-minute end credit roll, that was like shockingly long. In 1977, that was like unthinkable back then. But in this case, it was a small team of people who, and we really, I was, even though I have no background in visual effects, I ended up animation supervising the entire film and kind of building out most of the pipeline until near the very end. And I want to talk about the contribution of Folk Effects, who was an amazing vendor who came on kind of later and made my life so much easier by inheriting about 35 of the really difficult shots in the movie. But yeah, I mean, we would hop on as soon as they were done with their day job. We'd hop on Zoom and we'd review the work for the day or for the night, and they would work on it kind of after hours on weekends. And it was like it was an amazing collaboration, because these are people who are geniuses at their craft. Animators often, especially CG animators, they don't get a lot of sunlight. They don't get a lot of love from people. They don't get enough shout outs, but we were really working together the way an actor and I would work together. It's over a much more, kind of protracted period of time, but it really is. We're talking about motivation. We're talking about, the biophysics or whatever, the biomechanics of like, oh, what can we, what in the rig can we do to make it? I couldn't afford like a muscle system or like a skeleton, which is often what you'll build and then simulate on like a really big movie where money's just not money's not an obstacle for stuff like that. I couldn't afford that. So instead it was like, okay, what can we do animation side that can like look like it's faking the extruding of like a muscle when the Queen Griffin turns her neck or whatever. So everything feels as alive as possible. It was really, we knew what we wanted. That helped, right? Like like I said, my buddy Eliza and I, we storyboarded every single shot, even the scenes where it's just a back and forth dialogue thing. Every shot was storyboarded. We cut an animatic from that. And then my director of photography, Scott Siracusano, and I, we shot exactly that with basically no fat, which was the only way we were able to do this on a 3-day of principal photography shooting schedule. A movie this ambitious was we knew exactly what we needed, and we got nothing more. And so we couldn't have, even if we wanted to. We didn't have the time. And so it really was like when it came to the edit, Jordan Terratute, my editor, and I, we locked picture very quickly. And, I think, I don't know, sometime in late 2021. And then it was kind of just like, all right, we'll see you when the animation's done, and we'll drop everything in and we'll call it that. But it really was a process of like, we knew what the shots were. We knew the exact durations. Things didn't really change. And if you go in knowing exactly what you want, if you go in knowing like, here's what the creature needs to accomplish in this shot versus this shot, and so on and so forth, the CG, it's just a matter of giving it time and love. We could have done it even better if we had more money, but as is, it seems like a lot of people do respond. I've yet to hear a bad word about anyone who doesn't like the movie. The visual effects are never their problem with it. You know what I mean? It's it really, people, basically to a person have all said that element of it is rivals a lot of what you see on big shows. And it's not because it's not because there was any secret sauce that I have that someone else doesn't. It's that we really just took the time. We really took our time to give it as much love as possible. And had Sundance not come along and accepted us, I easily could have worked on the movie for another 8 months, trying to chisel away at and perfect it. We'd probably just be finishing it now had that not happened. But sometimes it's good to have someone come in and say, "You're done."
Yeah. Or you could literally work on it forever, as he said.
You really could.
I know a lot of artists there's things you never finish. It's just when you stop.
Yeah, there's a danger with that, and it's a give and a take, right? Because you want it to be perfect. Once you do press done, that's it. Like it's out to the world forever, and it's your prerogative as a filmmaker to make sure that it's in its finest possible, fettle or whatever for for the world to see and judge accordingly for all time. Because if you're not your own strongest critic, the Pauline Kaels of the world or whoever will happily step in to take that stead to make a really outdated reference there. But yeah, it kind of became an obsession. It became a passion. And I do as much as I hope in future projects I'm able to mix and match mediums a little bit more, use a little more practical stuff. In this instance, CG was the right tool. And I think I've learned so much about it over the past couple of years that I really know. I've developed the language and the kind of the tool set and the acumen as a filmmaker. I know how to get it to look as good as possible. And again, I can't stress enough, I got really, really lucky with a small handful of people I can't shout out Gabriel Beauvais enough, who designed the wood nymph in the fairy, the wood nymph and the baby griffin, but then also later stayed on to light every single shot, to render every shot, to basically become the de facto CG supervisor, reluctantly at first, and then gradually with more and more joy as we went along. And he really has become a phenomenal friend, collaborator. You've seen his work. He did a lot of the creatures for the Fantastic Beasts movies, Alien Covenant. He designed the creature for the Boogeyman, the Stephen King adaptation.
Okay,
and it was fun because while we'd be working on this, he'd be, tell me, oh, working on this thing and that thing. He's like, I'm doing a giant penis monster for a new Ari Aster movie. And I'm like, wait, what? Come again? He's like, yeah, Bo, have you heard of that filmmaker? I'm like, yeah, I think I've heard of Ari Aster. So I
saw the movie in the theater, actually.
Yeah. And so, again, I'm still in awe that I was able to get away with making this movie with the collaborators that I did at the budget level that I had, because it really, there's so many things that could have gone wrong. And I feel so grateful that so many people just kind of took pity on me and were willing to, a good friend of mine told me early on in college, like, if with regards to leadership, he's like, if you know what you want, and if you lead with passion and conviction, and you're willing to give your all, your crew will follow you to hell and back. And so far, anyways, that's more or less proven to be true. And I feel very lucky for that. And I look forward to applying all the lessons, good and bad, that were learned over the 4 painstaking years of doing that to what's next at this point.
Yeah. So, you really build, you do a lot of world building here for a short film. Was there ever thoughts to expand this? Like, let's make a feature film, or in the future, like if people respond to this, maybe we make a series or a feature?
Another good question. So a lot of times with shorts, people call the dreaded term the proof of concept, right? Usually what that means is like,
honestly, when you mention, like, a lot of times a short is like a passion project, but another thing is sometimes it is like
the sales goal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And in this case, so Em and Selma, as it was presented to you, that was always the story I wanted to tell. I grew up loving the short story format. Everyone from Ray Bradbury to H.P. Lovecraft to Harlan Ellison to Flannery O'Connor, like whoever, like I love short. Twilight Zone, of course, was an early point of inspiration for me. A lot of those are based on, Richard Matheson short stories or whatever. Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. It's such a genius. Yeah. It's hard.
I read for the first time not that long ago.
Yeah, or Duel. Duel was a short story. Yeah. Spielberg's first film. I'd argue that it's one of the rare cases where actually, in that instance, I think the film is better than the source material. But I love. There's
a few that you mentioned that. I know it's kind of a tangent, but because I listened to a lot of audiobooks. I started listening to them during the pandemic, and I continued. And it's very few, but there have been a couple that stood out to me that are Jaws is one of them. Much better movie than book.
I think even Peter Benchley would actually agree with that statement. A good filmmaker, a filmmaker can take a really great filmmaker, I think, can probably take a middling piece of source material. Not that anything Richard Matheson ever wrote was middling, but you know what I mean? They could take a piece of source material that's maybe,
someone I don't think gets enough credit because so many things have been inspired by Matheson.
Yeah, he incredibly influential voice. A lot of those kind of like early to mid 20th century authors, the Weird Tales kind of school of people. Like I really loved those writers when I was a kid. I remember there were a bunch of anthologies. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Stories to Stay Awake By, things like that. And
there's really not, almost all series now are either, ongoing forever or like American Horror Story, where each season is its own story.
Yeah.
But there aren't really the anthology series.
Beauty in just kind of like, I have this is the story, and in its optimal format is like 10 minutes or 10 pages or whatever. And that's it. It doesn't need to be more than that. We live in a time of like hyper abundance, right? Where everything needs to be, you need to wring the towel as much as possible, where every nook and cranny needs to be exploited. And I think sometimes what's much more compelling is the power of suggestion, right? Leaving certain things latent, letting the audience use their imagination a little bit, give them just enough that you're giving them this little like kind of impressionistic brushstroke, and you let them fill in the voids, if you will, for themselves. To me, that's always been much more interesting. Questions are cooler than answers. I mean, I think at a base level, we all know that, but unfortunately, when the almighty dollar is at stake, you end up having to just exploit your resources as much as humanly possible. And, that results in things being taken far more, being kind of strip mined basically, and completely scavenged when they don't need to be. But to answer your question, so it was always this 10-page script I had as presented. This was always the story I wanted to tell. At a certain point, well before we shot the short, so going back to probably early 2020, because I knew that at some point I hoped I was going to make this thing. I kept telling myself, like, it will happen, you manifest it, whatever. I decided to take my hand at what would a feature version look like. And at first it was kind of like, oh, this feels like maybe there's not enough story. But as I began to kind of flesh out Em and Selma's character, their backstory, the lore of the hunt itself, why do women in this world go through this? Like, why culturally, why is this like an ongoing, enduring thing that's been around for, uncounted generations? I realized, there's actually plenty more that I can mine from this. So to answer your question, I have a feature version. I've had it for many years. It basically builds on the relationship you see in the movie. I don't want to spoil what happens in the short, but basically the end of the short is approximately the mid-act point of the feature, and then the second half of the film kind of becomes a little bit of a Night of the Hunter or Most Dangerous Game type of thing. And I'm kind of going to leave it oblique and vague at that because I don't want to spoil the note that the short ends on. But you build on set pieces, right? Like there's certainly, with regards to the way that the creatures are handled, stuff like that. I've discovered, just dozens of other interesting things that you can do with all these creatures that add a sense of a ticking time bomb. There's an element in the feature I'm really excited about where basically the wing flaps of the wood nymphs are at a very specific hertz where Selma can't hear them anymore. But for Em, she's still young enough that they're kind of driving her crazy a little bit the whole time. So the longer they're in the forest, the longer it takes her to successfully hunt and kill a griffin, the more that sound begins to kind of drive her mad. And it's just, there's nothing she can do about it. You don't get used to it. You just have to get away from it. And eventually, for older people, they lose their sensitivity, and that frequency range is gone. But there's like all these little tiny world building details that with regards to the template that I already presented you in the short. I'm like, ooh, and you can do this, and you can do that, and you can do this. Lots of weird shit too. I don't want to spoil some of the weird stuff that happens in the short, but it's there is sex presented in the feature version of Em and Selma that's pretty wild. But again, it's not just there to be transgressive for the sake of being transgressive. It's there to serve you understand more about Selma's character, especially through that stuff, and why she's choosing to bring Em out on this.
Even her reaction in your short, it makes you think there has to be something more to the story. Yeah, why it's affecting her so much. Yeah,
the scene you're referring to me is the inflection point of the movie. Nothing we're trying to do makes sense without that one scene. I also think dramatically, it's I think it's the best executed scene in the movie. Like I said, you have to be your own strongest critic, and you won't hear me often. There's no self-anointed praise here, but I think that all the ingredients, as I hoped they would fall together, fell together very successfully in that sequence, and it got a palpable, very visceral reaction. And I just saw it the other night. We had our LA premiere at Holly Shorts at the TCL Chinese.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Your movie will never look and sound better than it will in that theater. It's only going to be downhill from here, unfortunately.
Not to make a show about myself, but that's where we had the U.S. premiere. My first feature film was.
Then, yeah. I mean, it really, it's an amazing room. It's an amazing experience. It never, it's a high that you keep chasing as a filmmaker, and it doesn't get better than it does in terms of audiovisual presentation for your movie there. But we got a just wonderfully audible groans of horror and disgust during that particular scene. And it's great because you opened this with saying, it was darker than you expected. That was always the intent. In some ways, I wish it was even darker still. I've always felt that, fantasy as a genre, to use that much maligned term again, it's often relegated to the dustbin of kind of like puerile children's entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like the world needs that. We need Never Ending Stories is. We need How to Train Your Dragons. We need, we do need that stuff.
Which Never Ending Story though is pretty dark too. You have the
sure, yeah, they would,
drowning.
Yeah, they wouldn't let you get away with that today, would they?
Yeah.
That was a special era. That Dark Crystal, Return to Oz. That was kind of a special time of dark fantasy cinema that kind of child friendly, but with an asterisk next to it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it should be relegated to just being escapist entertainment. I think that in the same way that the best horror, the best science fiction is often, as much headier ideas on its mind. Why can't fantasy do that as well? That's kind of a rallying cry for me as a storyteller. That's something I want to continue. I hope if I get the opportunity to explore.
Even like sword and sorcery movies with the same kind of idea. Like when I was a kid, like Excalibur is like a real movie. It's a very
it's John Borman,
movie.
Right?
Was that
John Borman, I believe, right?
Yeah. And even the original first Conan the Barbarian is honestly the same way.
Yeah,
and then they became kind of schlocky later on.
They become campy. But I mean, Conan is a good example of something that you go in for the sword and sandal-ness of it all. You go in for the Arnold, but it really does have a lot more on its mind. And in that movie's case, it's really kind of an interesting meditation on, is revenge worth it? It's it helps that it has an absolutely fabulous screenplay by Oliver Stone and John.
Yeah, and you could just think if you've never seen the movie, think, oh, it's based on a sword and sorcery comic book, like it's probably like cheesy or whatever. But no, it's like a serious movie.
Yeah, it has real weight to it, and I think that these movies can certainly something like Game of Thrones shows that there's an appetite for fantasy that's more than just swashbuckling heroism. But it seems that in terms of cinema, the world has been slower to catch up.
Yeah, very few. Northman's one of the few things that would stand out, I think, in recent.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, Robert Eggers is a filmmaker who gets this. You've heard him speak about stuff like this at length, and he's a big fan of all the Jungian archetypes and stuff like that. I'm drawing from a lot of the same kind of well springs of inspiration as him, to the point where really I now have to kind of sidestep I have to recalibrate some of my own decision making, because I don't want it to look like I'm trying to live in the shadow of a near contemporary or whatever. But yeah, no, I mean, there's people out there doing it and doing it very successfully.
Yeah, it's very rare though.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. For now.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what makes it special, is the fact that it's a rarefied commodity, I guess.
It was funny you said, so I'm actually trying to set up I call it Sword and Sorcery Month on the show, even though it's not necessarily horror, but it is movies that I really like growing up. And I like some of the sillier stuff like Beastmaster and stuff. But so my friend Adam Newman, who's a filmmaker in New England, he's going to co-host those with me. And he always calls them sword and sandal movies. And I was like, man, when I was a kid, there were sword and sorcery movies. And then so you just use the sword and sandal movie. So that's a little thing that we argue about. So
well, let's say, because sword and sandal, I think specifically is referring to kind of like the Italian, like peplum, I think is how you pronounce it. The kind of the 60s Hercules adaptations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a whole, in the same way that there was the spaghetti Western, right? There was also kind of the spaghetti Ben-Hur, I guess you might say.
Yeah.
Which was full of, kind of like, B-rate early Conan prototypes and stuff like that, and Hercules movies and things of that nature. And, that stuff like that can be fun. It's funny how you look today at how quick and how rushed a lot of productions end up being at the vanguard in this post-digital era. And you look back at some of the stuff, even some of the really cheap cash grab stuff from that time, and by comparison, the craftsmanship seems like it's on a whole different level than some of the things you see going, straight to streaming and stuff today. It's kind of funny how time vindicates certain things and not others.
Yeah, even like really big movies today, like The Thing. Like, I mean, it didn't do well at all. John Carpenter's The Thing, but it's like an all-time classic today.
Yeah. Well, and that's the danger as a filmmaker. I'm sure John Carpenter is both incredibly grateful and incredibly frustrated that movie has found an amazing life for itself.
I think it led a few of those that were like a lot of those movies.
Same summer
didn't do well, and then I think it led to him not making as many movies as he really should have.
Yeah, I agree. I agree at the level he wanted. He wanted to make westerns, right? Isn't that the famous story? Was that
Yeah.
he loved John Ford, and he really wanted to do a lot of kind of western type stuff, and just didn't really. Those were basically impossible to finance by the time he was reaching hitting his stride as a filmmaker.
So, what do you do with Em and Selma go Griffin hunting like after the festival run?
Sure.
Because there's a limited like platforms you can you can put on your own YouTube or Vimeo, but there's not a lot of places for shorts to go, which there's starting to be a little bit more, but I don't think
Yeah.
really as many. I think it's something that someone should really have a big platform for, because they always say people have shorter attention spans, and I do a lot of festivals and there's a lot of great shorts out there, and a lot of times they
They
just
are.
don't find a home after the festival.
Yeah. So with relation to Em and Selma specifically as a film, the short answer is I don't know just yet. We're
Mm-hmm.
still, we're 9 months into our festival run. We have a lot of great places coming up, some of which I can't announce yet because the slate hasn't been dropped. I leave in 24 hours for Edinburgh Film Festival for our
Oh,
UK
sweet.
premiere, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
We're opening for Redux, the what
Oh,
is it?
that movie's awesome. That's
Yeah,
actually one of my I just for Fantasia, and that was one of my favorite movies of Fantasia.
yeah, great,
I think
great.
that is really could be like a big movie like theatrically.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet. I'm excited. I've played a number of the same festivals as it, and it just so happens that I've never been able to be there at the same time, or I just,
Yeah.
Sydney Film Festival, wherever, I wasn't able to go. I'm excited to see that movie. I hope that the filmmakers don't mind that my movie's opening for them, because we're going to
Well, I
be
think it's a great combination, honestly. It's two of my not did you hear it's two of my favorite things I saw from Fantasia.
Oh, great,
Yeah.
great. Yeah. So that'll be a fun experience. My first trip to Europe as well. I'm embarrassed to admit
Oh,
at my
nice.
but yeah, so we'll still be on the circuit for quite some time. I guess I can now use this. I can't say why or how, but we're recently Oscar qualified.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's
and,
amazing.
and
Congratulations.
thank you, and we're gonna try. Crazier things have happened.
Yeah.
Does the movie deserve it compared to what else is out there? I have no idea, but it's. I also once upon a time thought Sundance, we didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of that
Yeah, I'll
happening.
be honest. I have friends who always, other filmmaker friends who always say like, don't even submit to Sundance, like
You have
unless
to
you like,
try. You have to
yeah,
try. You
right.
know.
If you don't try, you're obviously not gonna get in.
Yeah.
Uh, People
Exactly.
told me like you have to know someone there, and I was like, okay, I don't know, but I assume not everything that's there because they know someone. But
Yeah.
uh,
I,
so I assume you didn't know someone from Sundance. You were like, hey,
I didn't know anyone from Sundance, though I have to, and this is a good opportunity to give my wonderful cast a shout. I have to think that
oh,
Millie
yeah,
Shapiro,
definitely,
I
yeah,
have
having names involved that are
Millie and
respected, yeah.
Pollyanna McIntosh are playing her mother, this wonderfully deranged role that she just really
Yeah,
kind of.
which I can't believe I haven't brought up either one so far, but yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about them?
Yeah, of course, yeah, because
Yeah.
not only obviously it's amazing to have like big names in genre in the movie in the short, but they both do an amazing job. So how did you approach Pollyanna and Millie?
Sure. So start with Pollyanna. So she was a friend of my producer, Roger Mayer, another name I should have mentioned at this point by now. He's good friends with Lucky McKee, a name that I'm sure is well known to you. And obviously Lucky and Pollyanna have a
Oh
have
yeah,
a
their movie's amazing. Is it
yeah,
she or
yes.
her? Yeah,
The woman,
the
yeah.
woman. Yeah, yeah.
And so early on in the process, Roger suggested we should look at Pollyanna. I can ask her, and I'm sure she'll be down. I'll be honest, I didn't really know her work at the time, but I went and I watched a bunch of excerpts from The Walking Dead, her character Jadis, on that she across a whole bunch of seasons, and then one of the spinoffs. And there was kind of just the right balance of austerity and vulnerability. It's like, oh, this is interesting. I think that something like this could embody what we're looking for with
Definitely
Selma.
one of the more unique performances in The Walking Dead.
Yeah. Oh,
For
for
sure.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And so it worked out well that she liked the material, and she had a short, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly, she had a short break of time between when she was wrapping one of the Walking Dead spinoffs, I think Fear the Walking Dead, and then she had to leave to shoot Vikings Valhalla, I want to say in like Iceland or something like that. She had a very short window of time, and she's like, let's do it. I'm down. And then in the case of Millie, there were a couple names that we'd thrown out there. And Millie was one of them. Obviously, we'd all seen her in Hereditary and were amazed by her in Hereditary. I didn't know until later that she was also like a Tony winner from age like 13, I think, for Matilda on Broadway. That was
I didn't know until when I was researching her when we had her on the podcast.
Yeah. It's just kind of she's just one of those just born performers, right? Who's just been doing it forever. Comes from a very talented family where everyone kind of dabbles in the arts. And so, that one was kind of more through formal channels. We sent the script to our agents and we said, here's what we're trying to pull off. We have a tiny bit of money, hopefully just enough that you're not going to, send us away and tell us to take a hike. And they liked the script. I had a Zoom conversation with Millie, and it was clear right away that she just completely understood the character. She understood the tone. She understood what was trying to be achieved. And that was that. And we worked around her schedule at the time, I believe, freshman at NYU. And it kind of worked out. But I say it worked out, but I say that with a very big asterisk, because prepping and shooting at the height of the pandemic, again, this is late 2020, early 2021, and flying in Millie from New York and Pollyanna rather having a very limited window of time that she's available, basically meant we had to jump right in. We had one table read at like 7 p.m. the night before, and we were all on set at like 4:45 a.m. the next morning. Like that was it. Like it really was like, it had to be like so quick, everything, the production side. And I had I say this with the caveat that I had an amazing production crew on this film, and we couldn't have done it without them. But the production on this movie, it really hurt. I really ate humble pie on this movie because it really had to be done so fast. My DP, Scott, and I, we were constantly chasing daylight because, late February is basically still winter, right? And when you're shooting, most of this movie was shot up in the San Bernardino Mountains here in Southern California. And when you're on the east side of a mountain, you basically have like 5 hours of usable daylight before it just becomes so shadowed, and it just, continuity wise, you're done for. The black and white, again, very forgiving of these things. But if you were to just look at the footage out the gate, back to back in color, like no two shots remotely match. And I don't mean in like a way where you then massage it in the grade and everything's fine, like in a way that it would have taken like heavy visual effects lifting to make every single shot sequentially. It really truly was. That was also part of why the post-production became so painstaking, was because okay, like I'm not going to let time get away from me like this again. Like we're going to take our sweet ass time and we're going to make this, with what we have now, as good as it possibly can be downstream. But yeah, I mean, I got really lucky. They, especially on screen, they look amazing together. There's one or two shots where you see them in a two shot and you really see this amazing height disparity because Pollyanna is, I think, just about 6 feet or damn near. And Millie, I want to say, is 5'2", 5'3", so probably shorter than that, maybe closer to 5. Millie, if you're seeing this, I'm sorry if I'm getting it totally wrong, but there's this great height. You really feel the power imbalance between them when you see them visually. It's very effective.
And Pollyanna always gives off like a very, not that they're both strong women, but like a powerful woman. Yes. And I think Millie has a lot of, you always have a lot of empathy for her.
Yeah, a lot of vulnerability, right? That was really important to me. I said, like, whoever from out the gate, I always told people, like, these need to feel like characters who in their own respective ways are not, like, could never get along with like mainstream society. Selma, because she takes this right too seriously. She's too overzealous. She's too dogmatic and almost religious about it. And Millie, because she picks at that little thread and asks, why this, why that? And it pisses her mom off, and it kind of turns pathological eventually. She's the born outsider. And Millie got that, just like that, just from the jump, she understood exactly what we were driving at with this character. And yeah, that element was great. I think, I wish we had even more time, because I think we really could have boot camped it, and we really could have I would have loved, you hear stories about, cast taking, like a week to just go hiking together to get to know each other. And like, part of me wishes that we could have made this movie at a time where that would have been possible. I think we could have done even better. But as is, they brought a lot of ethos and humanity to the roles, and given the ridiculous time constraints we had, I think they both should be commended and applauded for the work they did here.
I think the black and white really brings out the emotion in Millie's eyes. Like her eyes look like really amazing in the grayscale. I think
they look amazing in color too. I mean, she just has these, her peepers are just that vivid blue. If again, were you to go,
they kind of come through in black and white. Like you can tell that, you can tell they're not. I don't know. You can tell like they're blue eyes, even though it's a black and white.
Yeah. No, she's very much in charge of her instrument, as I say about actors. She knows how to. She expressively, she has a great degree of subtlety and nuance with very few words that need to be spoken. And what more can you hope for as a director, right?
Mm-hmm. So, we talked about the nymph characters. Like, did you have other creatures at all ever thought? Because you can't fill up a short with a ton of creatures, but in the world, it also gives like the idea that there's not just griffins. This is a world of fantasy creatures.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you asked that. The only difference really between the original draft and what you see is that originally we had one or two choice flashes to Selma's hunt, where we reveal that she was forced to cut a unborn baby dragon from its mother's womb by hand. Yeah. And and long before there were serious conversations about budget and stuff, I preemptively cut that, knowing that was just going to be an expense that I wasn't going to be able to shoulder. And it risks becoming, you don't want in a movie like this, it's a great risk of like, I don't want the special effects as much as I love my special effects team, as much as I love the work that they did, and as much as I relished the process of bringing those to life. I don't want people to look at this movie and feel like it's like a VFX demo reel. That was always the danger, right? Anytime you see a short that has a lot of visual effects, that's always the danger, is that it feels like, oh, this is a visual effects supervisor who wants to become a director, cashing in all their favors to make that happen. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a valid, sure. There's no right or wrong way to become a director like that. If that's your upbringing and that's your toolkit and that's your expertise, like smoke them if you got them, more power to you. But that's not my background. It just so happened that this particular story happened to call for a lot of that stuff. And so I'm always very careful with how I pitch this, that it's not a monster movie. It's not a creature feature. It's a tragic coming of age fable that just so happens to take place in a world where there's like fucked up fairies and inbred griffins and stuff like that, But yeah, I mean, the feature version that I have that we can talk a little bit more about if you want, or we can press on because it doesn't exist yet. It doesn't really matter yet. That significantly expands on its bestiary. There's significantly more stuff in it, including the aforementioned quick flashbacks to Selma's hunt. And when I say a dragon, I don't mean a Game of Thrones dragon. I mean a dragon that you've never seen before. I mean something that's basically like a giant fucked up like gecko type thing that is not at all your normal, movie dragon, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, well, I would assume it's like it's not the typical fairy or nymph that you see. It's also not a griffin that if this existed, what would it would look like?
Yeah, exactly. What's the modest, grounded, biologically plausible version of all these?
And earlier on you talked about having like all different cultures have the flood myth. All different cultures have a dragon too, which is is interesting.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of kind of scholarly research on why that is, and putting aside like East Asian dragons, which are typically like signs of good, they're typically associated with like good omens and stuff like that. Looking at like the European dragon, it's basically a perfect composite of all the animals that ancestrally would have posed a danger to us. They have wings and talons like birds of prey. They have the fiery breath of presumably a venomous serpent. They have the physiognomy of a crocodile, whatever. They're kind of perfect composites the body's often like a feline predatory cat type body, right? If you were to take away the wings and the reptile head. And so, I mean, they're like literally perfect evolutionary composites of the things that our ancestors would have been afraid of and would have had to watch out for. And so that's why I think dragons are such great archetypal symbols of evil, is because they, I made a film prior that a Vietnam War set horror short called Black Dragon, ironically, that explored that exact notion. And so, I mean, that's why these creatures endure. Griffins alone, I didn't realize till I started researching it for the feature version of this story. I mean, how ubiquitous those are across culture. I mean, like Pliny the Elder, it references it in one of his dissertations on animals of the world, you know, as though it were just a real animal, like an elephant or a tiger or whatever. They pop up in ancient Syria. They pop up in Greek myths. In medieval heraldry, they were used as a sign of nobility and virtue. The Catholic Church at one point used them as a touchstone for marital fidelity. I'm not making this up. You can go about this. And I use that to my advantage in the feature version, where you learn that Selma has a really bad relationship to the men in her life, and that's kind of brought up by M, and it's kind of a little bit of a turning of the knife, if you will. And so, I mean, there's all this kind of cultural touchstones and reference points that they drudge up with them. They're in the same way the dragons and things like that are also kind of, you know, ancient touchstones. They also have kind of their own interesting history. It's a little more obscure. You have to dig for it a little bit more. It's not as well known as it would be to you and I, like with dragons or whatever. But it's there. It's out there in the.
I just think that because like. No, nothing. It's werewolves and vampires, and it's actually cool, like the rise of being able to see more foreign horror today, because they'll use mythology from areas that I'm not familiar with. It's like, oh, this is cool. And same thing with like a griffin. Like we all have seen dragons and stuff, and that's great. But there's a lot of monsters from mythology that there's a lot out there about, but people don't talk about today. So. I think people could go back and find some interesting things to make like a modern horror movie or genre film about.
Well, it's cool because then you don't really know what the rules are. Like with a vampire,
vampire werewolf, you're like everyone basically knows what
exactly. And obviously there's variation. Like Chinese vampires are insane. Like, you know, I believe those are the ones that can hop great distances. And if you lay out a string of rice before them, they have to count every grain before they can pass. They cannot pass that wall of rice that you lay out. So, I mean, you know, there's lots of cultural specifics that can be really interesting and arresting and used to your advantage storytelling wise. But yeah, with a griffin, you know, the rules are more kind of up for grabs. There's more room for invention. Versus a werewolf would be the perfect example, since that largely is unchanged from time and place for the most part. The rules are pretty well codified and set in stone. Everyone knows them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because then the question becomes, okay, within a framework that everyone knows, how can you tell your version that feels fresh and interesting? And that's a great challenge. I like that to a certain extent. But it's also great being able to kind of invent something either from scratch, which is what I usually like to do. That wasn't the case, obviously, in Selma, where, you know, fairies and griffins are, you know, known commodities. But it's like, okay, how can I take that and kind of make it our own? How can I make a fresh?
I also think if you do use something that does have a basis in real mythology, it adds a realism to it, even if people aren't aware. It's just like, this has been around for centuries or whatever. So it gives like a, you know, just like a realism or a timelessness to it.
I think the archetypal timelessness, I think that's exactly what we were chasing here. That's kind of always my North Star, is trying to figure out how can you relay these ideas in a way that, again, what was that term I used earlier? It's the achieving that mythic register, right? That mythic note that sings out across time and will be relevant for, you know, long after we're all dead or whatever.
Martin had brought up, I'm not sure what the 9-minute pilot for Batman TS is because it's amazing, but Fried Berry started as a short. Yeah, there's been a lot of shorts that I've seen at festivals that went on to become, you know, features. The Fried Berry.
To put a final button, sorry, I never really actually answered your question about that. We got derailed a little bit, but it so I mean, post Sundance, there was a lot of interest in what does a feature version of this look like. I have a draft. What I would like to do, much to the ire of my reps and stuff like that, is I really want to take some time away from the story, because spending 4 years in post
Sure.
living in this world
Yeah.
obsessively, it's like I'm done for now. Like I've said it in my own way, to the best of my ability. I've said what I needed to with the story for just now. What I'd really like to do is take a couple years, step away from the feature version, and then approach it with fresh eyes and say, okay, how can I shake up some of the con specifics so that it all feels completely fresh and new to me again? Because even though the feature version changes around plenty of variables and on paper it is arguably quite a different movie than the short, it's still the same basic story. It's the same basic, pathway that's being followed. It's just the landscapes off to the sides look a little bit different and stuff like that. Thankfully, my prior short, the Vietnam War set one I mentioned earlier, that had already begun to, that played on the festivals, that had a good 2.5-year festival run in the whole time that M and Selma was in post. So that movie had already begun to kind of open doors and to, financiers and producers and stuff like that. And so already we have a couple different feature projects that are set up in different places. At least one of which has enough thematic overlap with M and Selma that the short kind of functions as a decent enough proof of concept for how I handle certain themes and ideas and thematic ingredients or whatever. So the short answer is there will be an M and Selma feature at some point. I would like to take some time away from it, grow up a little bit more as a storyteller, figure out if there's some new, interesting ways that I can explore the core themes of the story, and do some other things in the meantime, because I don't want to be the Griffin hunting guy for the next 10 years.
I understand. So, since your previous short played festivals, was that your first experience with festivals?
Yeah, and it was really lovely. It really there's been a lot of repeat places with them in Selma now, and it taught me a lot about, oh boy, what a joy, but also what a money pit that whole world can be.
Yeah, there's definitely huge benefits to festivals, but it's good to like you said, some of them are better than others. Obviously, some of them are like scams, that don't actually show their movies and things like that.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say about that. There's two different, because post Sundance, a lot of people have written to me saying like, oh, like congratulations, is amazing. Like, how did that happen? How did you make that happen? And presuming that the only pathway to a successful festival run is like the big five, right? Like if you don't get Sundance, Toronto, Cannes, Venice, Berlin, whatever, or South by, or a couple other good high tier ones, like you're screwed and that's it. And that's just not true. There's a lot of ways to have a great festival run. Some of the best festivals that I played at, period, in my time, at this point now well over 100 between the two movies, were festivals that I'd never heard of before being prompted to submit by someone who said they had a good experience there. I have to give a shout out to FilmQuest in Utah, which is a smaller genre festival that everyone who attends knows is just like the best kept secret and is just like the most fun you'll ever have. Holly Shorts. I never see more amazing short films and upcoming amazing filmmakers than I do there, and you'll never see their movie in a better light than you will there. So everyone obsesses about getting one of the big ones, and if you can, great. Like I don't know how I got so lucky with M and Selma. I've seen plenty of other movies that are objectively better than mine that deserved to be in my slot, but for some reason mine got picked instead. I'm not going to question it. I'm not, never look a gift horse in the mouth, right? Just be grateful and shut up and move on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to have a good festival run, and it doesn't mean that it has to be like all or nothing. You get one of the big ones or you're screwed. I've had a lot of amazing experiences at festivals that were, either newer or just aren't that well known, but in terms of experientially were just wonderful. And I met amazing people there. And some of the best friends I've now been lucky enough to gather over the past 2 or 3 years have been people I met on the circuit.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think there's a lot of quote unquote smaller festivals, Boston Underground Film Festival,
Mm.
Amazing Fantasy Film Festival. There's something about, in my opinion, the festivals where there's one screen because everyone's
Yeah.
watching all the movies together, and
Yes.
that
Agree.
also builds like a community feel, I think, to those festivals.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And it's all about, it's you're at the mercy of the programmers, like what kind of experience do they want to make? What kind of experience do they want this to be for the filmmakers who attend? And a lot of people who run these, not all, but a lot of them, they really, really, really care about the filmmakers and they really want it to be an amazing experience for everyone. And like I said, the best of them, the film quests and places like that, they go so far out of their way to make sure that like everyone feels included. They really make you feel like you're at summer camp, and
Yeah,
you're in years old.
I'll never mention on air which festival. This is a really big festivals that really treated me terribly, and I'll tell you off if you want. But so it's not exactly what you're saying. It's not all. This is the big prestigious
Yeah,
festival, and then these aren't. But
yeah.
there are. Yeah, but you still have to. I think just do your research. Ask somebody who's been to one. You
Yes,
know.
yeah. Do your homework. Look at what else they've programmed. It never hurts. Write a friendly hello email. As my close friends will tell you, I'm a prolific emailer. As I wrote you a pretty
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
It never hurts to just reach out and say hi, and keep
Yeah.
it short and polite and whatever. But I mean, the worst that happens is that they just don't get back to you. You're
Yeah, I give the same advice for people have asked me, how did you get, so and so on the show? I
just
mean, you just
ask, right?
ask them.
Just
Yeah.
ask. Yeah,
What the worst they're gonna say is either no or not get back to
yeah,
you. They're gonna
exactly.
come beat you up or something.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
least as far as I know, that's not happened yet. But
Right, right. And just because we're talking about this too, like I have to give a shout out to Fantasia, obviously.
yeah,
Mitch
Fantasia's
Mitch
amazing.
Davis is every bit as lovable and affable and wonderful and warm and high energy a guy as I heard he was. He's a big fan of this movie. He told us very early on that we got in. I had to keep it a secret for a very long time. And he's been a great advocate for the film. And it was an amazing lineup of movies that I played alongside. I felt little bit of imposter syndrome. I know that that's kind of a maligned term at this point, and everyone claims to get it. But I mean, truly, if you could see some of the other movies in our block, I definitely felt like I was the odd man out. But yeah, I mean, like that's again an amazing experience, a festival that really is both of scale, but also like really goes out of its way
Right.
to
Well, yeah, because I say like there is some about one screen, but something like Fantasia, they just couldn't. It would be impossible to
yeah,
have
yeah,
one
yeah,
screen
yeah.
unless
Yep.
you had a screen that held like about 2,000 people or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's the beauty of festivals is like it's like you get that, you get all these different variables, right? You
Yeah,
get
yeah.
the big, the bold, the small, the wonderful. Sometimes those work, sometimes they don't, but each one's its own little flavor. And
Yeah,
I've
and there is something you can get out of different ones that maybe like you might one might be good to find new people that you want to work with or
exactly, or people who can, swap war stories with you, or people who like a lot of people have subsequently post Em and Selma have begun reaching out because they want to do their first movie with visual effects, and
Mhm.
and they're like, I don't know anything about that. Like, how do you go about this? And it's been fun. Not that I'm an expert by any means, but I've learned just enough that I hope I can help other people stay out of trouble
Yeah.
financially with their decision making. And so it's been fun kind of helping some friends and colleagues kind of like navigate, their first VFX hoorah or whatever. And that's those are relationships that have all been born out of all sorts of different festivals and stuff like that. And yeah, it's really it's lovely. It really is. Not everything has to be Cannes, not everything has to be Sundance. If you get those, awesome, great, more power to you. But other festivals can have just as much value, and it's really it's like anything. What you put into it, you'll get out of it. If you go in thinking the only way to do a festival run is that you have to go to a place where like you'll get a 3-picture deal with A24 and you'll sign with an agent the same day, you're setting a pretty unrealistic expectation for yourself. Reach for it by all means, but if that's the only bar and everything less than that is like unacceptable, you're gonna have a pretty miserable time.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good way to put it. That goes for a lot of things.
It does, right? It
Yeah.
does. And again, be ambitious. Like the thing I always say to my collaborators out the gate is like the bar has to be masterpiece. Nothing less than that is acceptable. I'm not saying we achieved that because we most certainly
Yeah.
didn't. But that needs to be the aspiration, right? That needs to be like we need to make the Sistine Chapel of short films or whatever. And then if you fall short, at the very least, hopefully you achieve something really bold and interesting. You took a big swing. But yeah, it's I'm still learning, like I've basically been doing the festival thing for, between the last one and this one, 3 years uninterrupted now. And I'm still making mistakes and still learning how to navigate these things effectively. And, occasionally blowing a chance at a good regional premiere because I said yes to a different place first. Well, I really should have held off for a different one. I mean, these are just the mistakes.
Yeah, that's actually like I'm no expert either, but that's like some advice when
Read the
people ask
fine
me.
print. read the fine print on these things. Yeah.
And that it is something I found out does matter. Is like, just simple advice. If you could get like the world premiere at the quote unquote biggest one you can, and then these other ones will be really cool for you to go to. But the different premieres, the world premiere and the regional premieres, they matter to all these different.
They do. It's like building a business plan in a way. It's like here's the ideal rollout. Here's what it will look like over the next couple of years. Here's what the profit horizon or whatever could look like on it. You really have to kind of almost take off your filmmaker cap and you have to put on more kind of like your, I hate to use such a soulless term, but like your brand strategist hat, right? It's kind of two different things. But that said, I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just a matter of what are you looking to get out of it. And I can't stress enough, some of the absolute best experiences I've had, bar none, were at festivals that I wouldn't have known 4 or 5 years ago were the ones that were going to be like my favorite memories of their respective.
Yeah, that's another thing. Honestly, just the memories and the experience alone are big things. I mean, I'll remember a lot of the experience I've had at festivals.
Yeah, forever, right? Yeah.
So, and that goes for honestly anyone listening. Like, I think any level you're on, even if you just want to watch movies, and I don't want to say just watch movies. That's amazing. I would recommend festivals. You find one in your area, and everyone's after the movies are pretty much on the same level. The filmmakers, the watchers, anyone involved at all, because you all share like the common love of movies, and you'll go out and hang out and talk about them.
Well, in some ways, the people who show up to festivals who are just there because they're cinephiles, they have no vested interest in actually making a movie. In some ways, they're your best litmus test whether or not your movie works.
Yeah.
They're not going to look at the movie in the sense, they're not going to come up to you and so much break down your technique or break down, the reason why they liked it is usually more at the level of like, how did it make me feel? It's less like, oh, how did you afford a techno crane for that shot? Or, oh my God, you got this colorist, like, just like the shit that we nerd out about as filmmakers that most people just don't care about at all. To be blunt, they just, they take it in its entirety as you've presented it to them. And I think in some ways your best, like I like family members, you know what I mean? Like people who like, they're going to give you the most honest, excoriating assessment of your movie you're probably ever going to get.
Right. Yeah.
And that's good. You need that because we at the end of the day we tell stories because we need to, right? Because we love it, because we'd die if we couldn't, because we can't imagine doing anything else, but also because it's the communal element. It's the sitting around a campfire, as hunter-gatherers telling each other stories to remind you that you're still alive and the saber-toothed tiger hasn't dragged you outside into the dark just yet, that there's still hope, there's still something to dream about, there's still something to reach for, to be inspired by and aspire to. And it's really important that as a filmmaker, you want to tell stories that will really gut check people in that way. It doesn't mean it has to be broad appeal. It doesn't mean it has to be a one size fit all. No, of course not. I hope I never make a movie that everyone loves, because then you've probably made a movie for nobody, really. You know what I mean? You've probably
I always, if a movie's like something that either a lot of people love or they hate, I usually at least think it's going to be something that's probably interesting.
Oh yeah, it's that classic test of like 5-star, 5-star, 1-star, 1-star, 5-star, 5-star, 1-star.
Yeah, right.
those are usually the most interesting movies,
Yeah, something that's really middle ground. It's like, whatever. It's
Yes, precisely. That's the great danger. Exactly. But you do your best, and you hope that something in there speaks to people. And otherwise, you kind of roll up the sleeves and get ready to just dive into the next one.
When you mentioned like your family members, that gave me a good idea for anyone out there who wants to take this. I think it'd be a funny post. It'd have to be like a certain kind of movie, and you just put all these quotes from your family members, like and it just says like so and so's mom, their brother, and yeah.
Maybe you should let someone else write the next one, Mom. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be even better if there weren't like glowing reviews and they're from
Oh,
the mom.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Someone do that out there. You can credit me or whatever. But so can you say anything about, I don't know if you're even, I don't know, Fathoms. So this was in your email of
Oh, sure.
a
Yeah.
New England ghost story. It's coming up, and I'm in New England, so this is interesting.
Yeah. So this, I'm hoping this will be my first feature. We'll see how the financing falls into place, but I like to pitch it as kind of a nautical New England ghost story, something like that. It follows 3 generations of women living in 1930s Cape Cod in kind of a dilapidated.
Well, that's exactly where I am, Cape Cod.
Yeah. I know, yes, and kind of a dilapidated. So this would be on kind of the outside of the hook, so kind of North Truro, I guess, something like that, or South Truro rather, the side facing the ocean, not the inlet, not the bay. 3 generations of women who have a very contentious relationship, and we don't really know why at first, and then things take a turn for the surreal and Kafkaesque when a dead sea serpent washes up on their private beach and kind of brings with it a lot of unburied family trauma and stuff like that. So it's essentially, at its core, it's a ghost story, but it's using, and I don't want to spoil why that is, but it's using a sea serpent as a proxy for what would normally be a traditional ghost. It's very much an actor's piece. It's 3 generations of women, 3 different actresses in very different places in their life. And I hope it can be kind of like a tour de force performance movie, something like I guess the cheap elevator pitch would be like Grey Gardens with a Lovecraftian aftertaste to it, something like that, I suppose.
Well, I'm very intrigued. I like the idea. I really love the Griffin hunting here. So I'm really. Are your previous short? Is it online somewhere for me to watch?
No, we haven't released it yet, and
Yeah.
I don't know what the future of that one will look like. It did its festival run, and it opened a lot of doors here in Hollywood, LA, which is great. But I mean, it's a flawed movie. It has wonderful performances by my leads, and everyone worked very hard on it. But it also, I made it when I was a much younger man than I am today, and it has a lot of the classic pitfalls of a filmmaker trying to bite off more than they can chew with the time and money they have, and so it feels pretty rough around the edges to me. I don't know, maybe a DVD or Blu-ray extra one day, something like that.
That would always be fun.
We'll see. For now, it achieved its purpose, and I'm kind of just, I think you should always focus on just kind of what's next.
Yeah.
So what keeps life worth living, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. And strong female characters in your stories.
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in I grew up in I'm a product of a divorced household, and God
I was
rest.
actually gonna ask something because I was raised by a single mom, so I was gonna ask.
Oh, so yeah, that ends
Yeah.
up kind of bleeding into your
Yeah.
ideas quite a bit. It really that especially if it's at kind of just the right age, which is kind of when my, not to get too personal, but when my parents got divorced, it was at kind of like just the right / wrong time in life where it really had kind of a lasting impact. And I stayed with mom and have a great relationship with mom and my sister, and they were both very social and had huge female friend networks. And so just from a very young age, that was just something I felt like I had observed more and could kind of speak to a little bit more. And I've tried to varying degrees of non-success to write like a father-son story or kind of more male-driven stories, and it honestly kind of feels less authentic. Another word that I think we abuse way too much these days, the authentic. Yeah. But it really it felt like kind of I was reaching for something I just didn't really have in my toolkit, and so it's kind of, this is a more comfortable. I'm just more comfortable, I guess, inhabiting women's voices when writing characters, I suppose you might say. Yeah, just more real world observance and at a more formative age, I suppose, something like that.
Has your mom seen your movies?
Uh,
Em and Selma?
not this one, not yet. No, not yet. None of my family have yet. And so we're waiting for a New York or Massachusetts premiere, and so we'll see. We'll see.
All right. There's a lot of cool festivals in the area. So. Not so much there's a couple, not so many Massachusetts, but there are some really nice ones in New York.
Underground, Boston.
I'm a huge fan of Boston Underground. I go there every year. So.
Yeah. You've got lots of good stuff. Yeah, that's at the Brattle, I think, right? Is that
correct?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to the Brattle?
I have. Yes, I saw. God, way back in the day when I was like in my pre-teens or something, I saw Antichrist there. That was
wow. All right, that's a heavy movie.
Experience. That was an interesting experience that I've never forgotten. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a great theater. And Boston Underground's all in that one theater. So that's cool. There's just something special about that. I think you can go sit up in the balcony with the balcony kids, or
And I really hope that when Fathoms, the New England set feature we were talking about, I really hope that I can make a compelling case to shoot that on Cape Cod. It looks very different today than it did in 1930. It would require quite a bit of paint outs and quite a bit of visual effects, sleight of hands to to really sell 1930 Cape Cod, because nowadays it's so built up with kind of
you can definitely find places though that aren't.
We'd have to be careful, but it's of course like the economics of filmmaking are such that of course you always end up chasing incentives and stuff like that. But at least for now, my hope is to make a compelling play that we should actually shoot them, because Cape Cod, what's so unique about it is it's on a latitude. The reason why it used to have, it still is like a big like artist colony and artist retreat, is because the light is amazing. It's on the exact same latitude that places like Tuscany and places in Europe that are super famous for having their beautiful light. It's on the exact same equatorial latitude as that. And so the after, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The sunsets and stuff are just incredible. The light there's nothing else quite like it in the continental United States. And it's that whole coastal New England feel. That's such a intrinsic part of my upbringing. I really would like to capture that. Are there places maybe in Canada, on the Eastern Seaboard that could pass for it? Maybe, if you squint, if you're careful with your framing. Are there places in Ireland that could pass for it? Yes, probably, definitely in fits and starts. But for now, until the budgetary realities come crashing down on my head, as they may or may not in the coming months, for now, my play is that we need to shoot this in Cape Cod, because that's the only way you can really capture that essentially coastal New England period atmosphere that is really important to the story of that film.
All right. Well, that's very exciting. And if it happens, I'd like to at least come out and watch a day or something.
Yeah, of course. I for now, we're still making a play to shoot it on 35 and do it all.
Have you ever shot on film before?
Nope. No, this would be my first rodeo with that. Outside of probably like a Bolex thing or two when I was like a preteen with the Tri-X film that you send off and realize was totally out of focus or fogged or whatever. But I don't really count those as proper experiences shooting on film. But yeah, so we'll see. There's a couple different projects right now that are in different stages of maybe this will happen, maybe not. Em and Selma's helped tremendously with all that stuff, but they're all kind of like weird, small, dark, and expensive movies. And so it's like and this is obviously a very risk-adverse time in the industry. But I think Fathoms stands as realistic a chance as anything at this point. So we'll see.
So you played Sundance, Fantasia. I know you can't say everywhere yet, but where does Em and Selma go next?
So next coming up, like I said, is Edinburgh for a UK premiere. We're going to open for Redux. That's on August 16th and 17th. They play us something like 4 or 5 times. They're actually playing they're playing us quite a few times in a very short window of time. So if you happen to be in the UK, you know,
Yeah, we have a lot of listeners in the UK, so
yeah, I mean, then please come see us theatrically. I dread the thought of people watching this movie on Vimeo, as I know you had to see it, and so I try whenever possible to just drag people to the theater instead to see it.
yeah, I would love to see it on the big screen.
It's just a whole. I mean, you know this. You've made films. It's like it's a whole different experience, right?
Yeah,
It's just getting it in the proper, you know, getting it in your DCP with the, you know, this completely different color bit depth and on a 2-story screen with 5.1. I mean, it's just it suddenly becomes, that's when it really becomes a real movie for you, you know. But we have a really great European festival coming up soon. I can't say which one, but it's the other really big genre one aside from Fantasia. Maybe you can guess which one I'm referring to, and I'm going to leave it at that. And then we have one that has helped us qualify for the Academy Award. Again, I'm not allowed to say what that one is. I'm sorry to be that guy. All this will be announced publicly in the coming weeks on social media or whatever. And beyond that, you know, we'll see. You know, it's you know, just because I think transparency is always kind of the best way to handle things. You know, for every successful place we've played, there's probably like 5 we've been turned away from, including festivals from which I'm an alumni. So, you know, just to throw out there for people who are hoping to one day get Sundance, it's not a magic ticket to then get everything. It really, you know, like it guarantees absolutely nothing.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because sometimes I've had people ask me to help them, like, because they know I've been in whatever festival, and it's like it doesn't really work that way. Plus,
No,
I'm not even going to do that to begin with. I'm not going to be like, hey, get my buddy's movie in this. I feel like an ass doing that. But
yeah. No, I mean, we've been turned away now from over 40 festivals, you know, so I mean, it's just to splash some cold water on the I just think it's always good to, because people only tell you the success stories, right? You only hear the stuff. No one really likes to focus on the doldrums of oh, you know, I spent a couple years where no one would return my calls and emails, or I spent a couple years where it was nothing but rejections. Like, people typically, for understandable reasons, don't like to dwell on that and talk about that. But you know, if anyone listening is in the place where they're maybe wrapping up a film, or they're about to make a film, and they aspire to, you know, go big and bold and shoot for one of the, you know, big 5 or whatever. If you're lucky enough to get it, amazing, congratulations. But don't think that it then confers automatic success elsewhere, because it doesn't work like that. Every festival has different programming needs.
Yeah, and things hit people differently, you know.
Yeah, yes, most importantly, yes, you're right. Someone who maybe loved your movie on a Tuesday, maybe they watched it on a Wednesday after having a fight with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and it happens that your lead actor looks or speaks just like
right. Yeah, it could be any reason.
It's no longer a viable option for them. And so, I mean, it's so fickle, it's so mercurial. You really never know, like, why or how something will land. You know, I've seen incredible films that had no luck at all in the festival circuit, and I've seen films that really left me scratching my head that had all the luck in the world. And
I agree. Yes, yeah.
You really never know. You know, it's just you just do the best work you can, and hope it will speak to other people, and just don't dwell on it. You know, don't ruminate about like why something does or doesn't happen. Just focus on the work, focus on always improving and making the best of yourself and what you have and the people around you. And that's all that's in your control at the end of the day, you know?
And where can people follow you or Em and Selma to see where it goes and what you're up to?
Yeah. I was dragged kicking and screaming onto Instagram, you know, for the purposes of film festivals. And it's been very useful actually in that regard. I have to admit.
You kind of have to be on social media.
In fact, I have to give it, I won't say who, because I don't want this person to get inundated with requests for free work, but one of the very gifted and amazing animators who worked on Em and Selma actually reached out to me over Instagram, saying that, you know, I here's what I've been working on. It's kind of killed my passion a little bit, and your movie looks really interesting, and I'd love to just maybe do a handful of shots, and I don't want to be paid. You know, this person immediately turned away getting paid, because then it would become a job for them. They really wanted it to be just like a fun piece of art that they could do. And I'm really grateful that they did this, because it was the work was amazing, and they've become a great friend throughout the process. But they never would have become aware that the film even existed had it not been for Instagram, you know. So I mean, as much as I like to vilify social media, I can't fully endorse that, because it has conferred some lovely benefits, and I've met some lovely people and discovered some great artists through it. So it has its purposes. To answer that question, Em and Selma Go Griffin Hunting short film, I think, is how you can find us, and Alexander Thompson Films, all one handle or whatever. Right. And I hope I don't have to stick around on it forever, because it's definitely a distraction, and it's definitely a lot of noise and stuff like that. But it's also been, you know, as well or better than I do, no one, at least early in your career, no one's going to shout this stuff for you. You know, you.
Oh, you really even through the show,
your own publicist, and and so
there are times I wonder why I'm on social media, but at the end of the day, you really do have to.
And if you're careful with it, if you curate it, if you really try and make it that, you know, you only really see art and things that are inspiring, if you kind of just turn off all the political shit and all the noise, it actually can be lovely. It can be a great inspiration.
Oh no, it's been a bit. I mean, that's how I met a lot of people that I've done stuff with or had on the show. And
and it's fun also, going back to the festival circuit thing. It's been great watching the journey of my fellow filmmakers who, you know, are short filmmakers.
I agree that it's like, even if I don't know them, it's like, oh, I remember seeing this person's short film, and now they've got, you know, this big movie out, or a cool movie out.
It's fun to be able to kind of cheer people on from afar, and, you know, just kind of stay. It's a good way
connected.
Exactly. Like anything, it's a tool, right? It's all technology. At the end of the day, it's a tool. It's all about how you choose to use it. It can be a force for good. It can be a force for bad, and anything in between. And it's incumbent on you to figure out how to make it meaningful and worthwhile, and not just noise, I guess.
Yeah. Right, very good. This has been awesome. I really like talking to you. Sorry it took a little while to get it scheduled.
No, that was my fault. I'm sorry. A lot of traveling back and forth from different time zones and stuff like that. Thank you for amazing questions. Thank you for always giving a voice to interesting filmmakers and interesting artists in the genre space in general. And this has been a total delight.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you back, you know, for Fathoms or anything else.
Fingers crossed, man. Hopefully within the calendar year, we'll see. Those famous last words, probably, when it comes to getting a feature made. But we're doing our damnedest. We're trying hard.
Yeah, and congratulations on Em and Selma. I really thought it was awesome, and it's amazing that you've got some great festivals that it's going to.
I feel very lucky. You know, it's by no means it's not the perfect film that I wanted it to be. I guess it never is, no matter what. But you know, I feel really lucky that a lot of very gifted people, like I said out at the start, were willing to just take this obsessive journey with me. You know, my producer Roger, Pollyanna, Millie, my amazing VFX team. We didn't even get to talk about Folk Effects in Montreal, which was a company that came on board kind of later in the movie's post-production life and did incredible work on some of the really ambitious heavy lifting shots. I actually got to meet them finally for the first time in person at Fantasia, because it basically 90% of the visual effects team in this movie, by total coincidence, happened to live in Montreal.
Oh wow!
A lot of them, I worked with over Zoom sometimes for 3 or more years. Yeah. And, you know, it's been a couple of them will actually be in LA soon, because a bunch of those guys, including my animation lead, Pia Levy, and Gabe, the creature artist who also lit them and stuff, they're both Emmy nominees now for their work on the final season of what show is it? God damn it, I should remember. It's a Netflix show, and it's blanking on my mind at the moment. Umbrella. That was it, Umbrella Academy. And so it'll be fun. I'll spend the day probably, you know, driving them to silly touristy LA landmarks or whatever and stuff like that when they're out here. And it's fun. It's like, you know, making a movie is like building a little summer camp for yourself, you know, and you hope that you're lucky enough that you then get to, these people like you enough that they want to do it again. And feel very lucky that a lot of them do want to do it again. And so hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, I found that people do like get their little clicks. I hate the word click, seems like negative, but like you find your group of people that you enjoy. Yeah, you enjoy being. enjoy being around is a big part of it too. And then you like to work together and you trust, and that's
Yes.
why. And big and small, that's why you see like even giant directors. A lot of times they work with the same people. It's because you find these group of people that you want to be around and you trust and you like working with.
Yeah, you build a little kind of like, it's like a theater repertory. You kind of just build your little cadre of people that really get you and that you can grow alongside. And that's one of the great gifts of filmmaking, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon. Yeah.
Well, Neal, take care of yourself. Thank you.
You as well. Yeah. And have a good time in England.
Thank you.
Edinburgh.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
I had a great time, and people told me the food's bad or it's expensive. I love the food, and I thought it was maybe even cheaper in the United States to eat places.
Expensive or not, I don't know when I'll be there next.
So just have a good time.
I can't wait. And I mean, another benefit you don't know about when you first start making movies. It can also give you the opportunity to travel too, which is
And I always think when I used to do a lot of conventions, I really just saw the hotel. But take advantage of that and go around and see the area that you're at.
I hope to see every nook and cranny of Edinburgh that 5 days can afford me. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. All
right. Cheers, my friend.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.